we're going to call our workshop here, 4 o'clock, May 31st, 2022. Call to order, declaration of a quorum, 6 members present, 1 on the way. Welcome. We'll move to item C, hearing of citizens. Ms. Horn, no cards today. Brings us to item D. Number 1, consider approval of new administrator contracts as recommended by the superintendent of schools. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Mr. White and board members. We have 4 administrative contracts we have for your consideration today. I came up here so my back wouldn't be to the, maybe that's what I should do is recommend Rocco with my back turned. I don't know. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'll go back to the agenda, Mr. President. 4 administrative recommendations for the board to consider. The first, Richard Rocco Grande for the position of principal at Oakwood Intermediate School. Rocco has served as assistant principal at Oakwood since 2015 and will be replacing Mr. Simak, who was recently promoted to the Director of Human Resources. Prior to his tenure at Oakwood, Mr. Grande was an assistant principal in Bryan and a teacher in Florida. We also have, I'm going to do all these and then maybe we'll pause for introductions of guests as well with our candidates. We have Ms. Bridget Cooper that we're recommending as Assistant Director of Human Resources. Ms. Cooper has served as principal of Bowen Elementary in Bryan ISD since 2014. Prior to that, she was assistant principal at Kemp as well as a teacher specialist and a classroom teacher. And I believe, and I know Bridget had an appointment in Houston, Consol graduate, and I'm going to forget which class. So Consol graduate. Lanny Grawl for the position of assistant principal at College Station Middle School. Ms. Grawl is currently a school counselor at CSMS. She also served as counselor at Spring Creek, was a counselor and teacher in Bryan ISD. And Lauren Guest, assistant principal at Riverbend Elementary. Lauren's currently the MTSS coordinator at Oakwood Intermediate. She previously served as instructional coach and interventionist at Oakwood and taught at Pebble Creek. Those are our administrative recommendations for today for the board's consideration.
I'd move to approve the administrator contracts as recommended.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Ben, a second by Dr. Payne. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0. Congratulations, and I think we're going to do intros.
Rocco, and please introduce the first principal in the family? Okay. Very good. Thank you, Rocco. Welcome aboard. Lauren?
Lauren Guest. This is my family. This is my son, Kason, my husband, Casey, and my mother-in-law, Susan.
Very good. Congratulations. Welcome. We're glad to have you. I know Bridget and Laney had other appointments, but welcome to both of them as well. Very excited about this group joining our administrative team.
All right. Congratulations again, y'all. That will bring us to item 2, consideration and discussion related to the 2022-23 budget development and compensation plan. Mr. Martindale.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Orright. Lots of moving parts. So we thought it'd be best just to schedule a time solely to talk about possible compensation ideas or thoughts, get the ball rolling. This is really to educate you, give you numbers, ask questions, and then maybe this will set us on a path as far as what we bring forward later for board consideration and approval. So with additional detailed information and 27 slides, you have a paper packet there at your seat, is our CFO, Ms. Strauss.
Thank you, Mr. Martindale, and the opportunity to discuss several things with you this afternoon. So we'll be going over the 22-23 preliminary budget. You've seen these numbers, but we think we need to just review them one more time. Some compensation information for you, property tax rates, a voter-approved tax ratification election. We've also just briefly brought that up in prior workshops as well. And then a summary of the various compensation scenarios that we're going to present to you tonight, or this afternoon, not tonight. So as a reminder, the 22-23 property value growth is estimated to require tax compression, forcing the tax rate down for anything really above about a 2.5% growth. So we've used 11.5%. We know that's going to be attainable, but really think 12.5 is possible. But 11.5 would produce an estimated 5.8 cents of property tax reduction. If we should get the 12.5, it really does not bring us any additional revenue because we're going to be forced to compress that tax rate down, but could bring that the tax rate down to 6.5 pennies of a reduction rather than the 5.8. So it's there to kind of show you what the possibilities are. And we will not know that until the end of July. So our budget assumptions that we're using for 22-23 still is 3.5% enrollment growth. That's based on information from our demographer, and that growth is calculated from what we call our snapshot date. That was the last of October this current school year. And then we get funded based on our average daily attendance and our weighted average daily attendance. So that calculates to around 13,600 and 17,595 is what we're going to use for our revenue estimates. So even though we feel like we might end up with a little higher than 11.5, we're going to continue with the 11.5% property value growth estimates. And that's projected to bring a total tax rate, including the debt service, of $1.1571. So again, that reduction of 5.8 cents, all on the maintenance and operations side. So when we apply that information to the funding formula for 22-23, we're estimating total revenues in the general fund to be slightly higher than $130 million. This past year, the appropriations were $127.6 million, so that becomes our base. At 3.5% growth, and with this tax compression, we are not anticipating any recapture at this moment, so that's good. And then some appropriations that we factored in here for a total of $1,250,000. That includes some positions for special education, some inflation, which is a lot in the fuel area. I think we're all feeling that right now as well. Property and casualty insurance, we are anticipating a pretty big increase there. And there's some other contracts in the district. We don't have all of the final amounts for next year, but we're anticipating our SRD program an increase. We've already got some firm numbers on required software, as well as waiting still on our appraisal district contract, among other things. So we've allocated $150,000 for those. And then we all know our current technical education program is growing in student enrollment. We do get weighted funding for that, and there's a spend requirement with that. So with that increased participation, we've got some increased spend requirements as well that we need to factor into the budget. So if all that comes true, that would be that revenues exceed appropriations at this point without any additional compensation of about $1.3 million. I think it's still important that we recognize that we are reducing the general fund's dependence on the ESSER funds that we utilized this past year by about $700,000. We used about $3 million, and we're lowering that by $700,000 in this calculation.
What's the available amount as far as the ESSER funds?
I don't have you mean the remaining balance?
Yes.
In ESSER funds? I can get that for you. I don't have it all. We'll use the most of ESSER 2 with the retention stipends that are coming up. Mm-hmm. And then we have ESSER 3. There's a few programs like summer school and a few other positions that we are budgeted to go all the way through summer 2024 with ESSER 3. So we kind of have them budgeted out at this point.
Okay.
But I don't have the exact amounts yet.
But it's pretty much all accounted for though.
Pretty much accounted for. Right now, what we're doing is, as summer school, we'll see exactly what we spend, and we might have a little bit of savings and some things like that.
But I think it's an important question because it's accounted for and some of it is recurring costs,
Yes.
right? I mean, like summer school.
We are looking at some ways to budget or to fund summer school after ESSER is finished, and we're making some plans for that in anticipation that some of those expenditures for summer will continue.
I think to this point and included next year, Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, a significant amount of those funds have been utilized for retention stipends.
No, that's correct. We did retention stipends last year and then again this year.
Now, let me mention this, and Amy's going to go through it, and I know she's going to say it. There's like 3 or 4 different, just here are scenarios. We're not coming with a particular recommendation today. That's not what this is to show you how the numbers move depending on the different things that are considered. And we can kind of go from there. Does that make sense? She's going to show you minimal effect fund balance, maximum effect on fund balance, conversation around TR, she's showing you a number of variables. There's not one thing we're coming to the table with today. Okay, it's just to get a feel for how things move.
Okay. So to start our compensation conversation, we want to remind you, current year for 21-22, when we look at our market comparison group that TASB does for us, we look at the 0, 5, 10, 15, and 20-year mark. That shows where College Station ISD is for 21-22, where the peer median is of the other districts, and I believe there's about 11. Our difference and what our percentile is to that peer median. So on the 0 year, for instance, we're at 47,000. Our peer median was 50,300. So we are in the 93 percentile. That 93% is in green because that means we improved from 21-22. I believe it was at 92%, and we're now in the 93%. The 5 and 10 year are yellow. That's what I consider neutral. They were at 91% for 2021 as well. And then 15 and 20, we lost ground in those 2 areas. Now remember, when we look at the next ones also, we're going to be comparing what scenario College Station ISD might do to the current year, 21-22 for our market. So we will lose a little bit once we know what all the other districts are doing. So anticipate whatever those percentages are, we would lose a little bit.
So to clarify, I guess, our problem set when we look at these scenarios, in my mind, the 10-year is kind of the worry because you can't make a 10-year teacher over in 2 years. So we haven't gained any ground there. And then we look at the comparison districts, even though there's good hunting, I don't think we're losing teachers to Copper's Cove. I think when you get that 10, 15 year, if you look at the private sector data, people are just retiring early. So we're not really necessarily competing with other districts, but we're competing with keeping teachers and then retaining the ones that are tenured at that 10-year mark. Is that the problem set, or is it competing
Well,
with?
I'd have to rely more on HR for that.
Okay.
But we do track on our resignations of what year they are whenever they resign and what year we are recruiting. And of course, we recruit in that 0, 1, 2 more than any of them because
That's what
that's where
worries
the
me is-
applicants are. But it doesn't mean that's where we want them.
Blaine, I don't know if I fixate on 10 years. I think the whole thing doesn't look good. I'll just be perfectly candid with you. I don't, there's, regardless of the colors, green, that's just relative to year over year. I don't,
Yeah, the next slide is what worries me.
yeah, I mean, to me, yeah, I mean, I don't, quite frankly, care for any of them.
And these are the medians from 21-22.
These,
The other districts.
no, that's all 21, 22. That's relative, it's all current year for everyone. it's the next slides that we end up
And-
comparing 1 year behind.
And I need to display my public ignorance or my ignorance on the public record. Why do we look at median versus like mean or?
Well, because what we're doing is we're looking at the pure median of those 11 for 0. We
Yeah.
could look at a number of different things. We could look at averages. We could look, it just depends on, rather than look at every mathematical formula there, we just pick the median. That's what TASB likes to look at.
Yeah.
Median is more accurate. Average is skewed by the weighted data.
Yeah.
Almost,
Yeah.
And
Well,
this,
that's
this
why I'm
is,
displaying my ignorance because
for salaries, it's almost always the,
and this is how your TASB salary studies report it this way.
So we also talked about the teacher turnover and that's important because, and teacher retention. So this looks at College Station ISD for 3 different years. 2021 is the last one that we have reports on. And what it says was the turnover percentage for College Station ISD was 11.7%, while the state average was 14.3. So you can see we fared pretty good compared to the state. And what was noticeable this morning when we really looked at that is that we were down from 1920, as was a lot of other districts as well. So that was interesting.
oh, but you have to compare it, I mean, you have to compare it there. We're much better than the state, and
Yeah.
I just think anecdotally, I don't have to, but that's what worries me. Is do we have, looking at the spread, assuming it's normally distributed, if there's 133 teachers on the market, are they good quality teachers that are living up to what we expect and what we recruit? I just think 11 objectively, regardless of the state averages, 11's too much to be turning over it, given the current environment. That's what worries me. And being 91% of the median.
didn't we once say also that even this turnover rate includes people who maybe even like some we just promoted a teacher, right?
Yes,
Some of those
this,
as well too. So it
it's
gets
considered a
misleading.
teacher turnover if they left the classroom.
Right.
So they can stay with College Station ISD and be promoted to administration, campus administration. But if they are no longer a classroom teacher, they're counted as a turnover, even though they might still be in our district.
So this is from Taper report. And the most current is through 2021. That's why it stops there. But all this information is available on TEA's website through district Taper reports. Every district listed here is in our comparative group, and then there's more. I do want to point out, Amy was probably about to go here, so I apologize. To the right, though, as we look at where we are currently, May 26, 2022, that we have 133 professional resignations. Last year, through the entirety of the course, we're at 137. So we're kind of at that number now, and we still have this summer to go. Now, what will occur, I don't know. This is just because the 137 is the total through the course of last year. It's not year over year.
And then Kim, to not be completely dismissive of the state average, but it's Zeno's paradox. If we get 10% behind, that means now we're competing with all those people that also are 22% behind. So just in a marketplace idea, once we get behind, we can't catch back up. And so I just want to stem that. If we're 91% below median on salary and we're losing 11% of people a year, how do we stop that? And I think by raising the compensation up closer to median.
Hey, I'm not going to argue with this page and being 10% or 9% below the salaries. That to me is the one that's scarier than the retention. I think the retention numbers, we got to compare teachers to teachers and districts to districts, and then to that data, I think we're doing okay, relatively. This 133 to 137, I do think is concerning. Do you have any idea how many we lose between the May 26th and the August? I mean, what percentage of all of our resignations happen in the summer?
I would be guessing.
An extra 10%?
And I think, Kimberly, quite honest, the last 2 or 3 years, I'm not sure how indicative how clean that data might be. you know, how many decisions we should be making on the last few years because circumstances have been so different. So I think from this, we're just trying to give some historical data. We have fared fairly well with retention or turnover, whichever way you want to look at it. That doesn't mean we'll continue to track that way. I think turnover, retention, recruitment is a challenge for all districts at this point in time, which makes how things look with our compensation all the more important. It always is, but all the more so because I wonder, I don't know this is just Mike Martindale. I think that the competition, I think there are fewer candidates to choose from collectively throughout the state at this point. And so I think a number of variables start impacting your ability to recruit. But at the same time, obviously, you want to work to keep the top-notch folks that we currently have. So it's twofold. So I'm stopping because I'm taking over Amy's presentation. Stopping.
That's
Amy?
okay. That's not my area. Okay. So looking at compensation, there's a number of things that you as a board have approved already for next year that is part of compensation, and I think we need to remind ourselves of that. The first one being the retention stipend that we will use ESSER funds for. You approved 2,000 for teachers and other campus professionals and 1,000 for all other staff. This year we'll be paying those amounts half in August, this summer, August of 2022, and the other half in January of 2023. So we'll be splitting that and paying it in 2 equal amounts. The other thing is the change from TRS Active Care to the new employee health plan that will come on September 1st. Our goal was to have comparable plan benefits with premiums that were comparable or less than what our employees have been paying this current year, and we were able to accomplish that. So I think both of these are favorable things for our employees as we look to next year. And then an estimated cost for each of the employee groups for a 1% raise. You can see that for each of those areas. Totals a little over $1.1 million is the cost as we start calculating those. And this will kind of be our base whenever we look at different scenarios. Yes, sir. Do you have a question?
To say, to be fair, considering that a lot of districts are using ESSER that I've seen, at least reported by the media, using ESSER funds to actually raise salaries. I mean, looking at, for example, a 5-year teacher in CSISD is making $48,000. When you factor in the stipend, it's really $50,000.
Correct.
So, I mean, I just think we need to keep that into, you know.
But it's 1 year, and so that's why we don't. That's
Well,
why I said it is part of compensation, and
Yeah.
I think it needs to be part of the compensation plan when we communicate it. But that will not be reoccurring. We don't have the resources to continue that.
Yeah, and that's the issue I have is when I see these other districts are giving raises and they're using ESSER funds, that's a you know, two
It's not
year
sustainable.
deal too.
It's alarming.
And so, you know, how we communicate that to,
The other part that is not being reported that you almost have to dig a little deeper is what's the layoff rate? Are they laying off teachers? Are they having to,
Student-teacher ratio.
are they having to downsize their
A lot to
staff
it.
to do that, to compensate that? I mean, there's a whole lot of factors in.
oh yeah.
'Cause it's public sector, so it's a zero-sum budget, right? We can't go sell more widgets to buy more teachers. And so we have a very low student-teacher ratio. We've got a very low admin ratio, because that's the first thing people want to say, oh, we got too much admin. We've got astonishingly low admin, because Amy works 3 jobs apparently. So that's what people want to say, well, where would we,
Mike does one, we know.
where would we cut it? Are we going to fire teachers to pay for other teachers? So, and ESSER is not, so we have to, that's when I look at the scenarios, it's what's sustainable going forward, that we keep the performance, and frankly, special services, like we talked about last meeting with the people are bringing their children here because of special services.
Yeah, and I just think though that the way we're doing it, classifying, for example, that $2,000 as a stipend as opposed to a raise, is the more Yeah,
I
responsible way to do it.
And I've seen, I don't know exactly how other folks may be utilizing their funds. I know many are doing a stipend similar to us.
Mhm.
Uh, if some are, and again, I don't know, choosing to utilize it to become a part of full compensation, they'll be accountable for that number at some point down the road. I don't know. That is not of my concern, other folks' decisions, but it is something of note. What Amy did here with giving you a percent for each particular uh, employment group, so it just gives us a reference or a number to go back to and look to, is she's going to show you, again, several different scenarios. So this just gives you the number to go back to know, well, if we did this here, this is what it cost. We did this over here, and so on and so forth. So it's data so that at the end, we have information to kind of begin to move to a certain direction, right? Or we can at least have an estimate is what we're looking at.
And I'm not anti-question, Blaine, but I think we have like 60 more slides to go through, so maybe we
Right,
can,
I just want to frame it
Yeah.
before we start looking at everything.
maybe we'll have
And
Amy
I
get through it all.
will make sure you realize this 1% includes, it's a full cost to the district. It includes the benefits, the TRS, the Medicare, all of that that goes along with it. Many times when TASB do it, they're just doing the base, what the base pay is, and I've calculated those additional costs that come along with it. So this is the first scenario. If we looked at a 2% increase for all of the pay groups across the board, that would be about $2.2 million in compensation increase. And when you compare that to the 1.3 million I said that was available, we have about an $894,000 budget where appropriations exceed revenue. That's our estimate at this point. That would be 2% across the board for all pay groups. So what does that do to fund balance? We keep saying we're watching fund balance. We've dipped into fund balance for, it's going to be 3 years now when we end this year, because we will utilize fund balance. And we would like to stay or want to stay where we are meeting that 75-day threshold, where they look at 75 days of expenditures is what TEA wants to see in fund balance as a measure to say that you will score all of your points in the financial rating system. Bond agencies look at this, and so with that $800,000 to $900,000 deficit projected for 2023, if that holds true, we would be dipping into it for a 4th year. But you can see the 75 days is about 27.1 million calculated with those expenditures. And our total fund balance would be 30.9. We can't look at all of those categories, but it's a good marker. But we would be declining.
Because I poke fun at you too much, I do want to point out that when Mr. Martindale was CFO, he did raise that fund balance and put us in a great position, because if you look at August of 19, and then what happened 7 months later after that, and what we had to do in 20, I mean, put us in a great position. So thank you for that. But at the same time, now the rubber meets the road. We got to figure out what to do going forward. Hopefully we've gotten through these last 3 years, 2 years, and we can move forward. So that's going to be the difficult part.
But you're exactly right. I mean, fund balance is there for a number of reasons, and to get through hard times is one of those. And I think we've experienced that. So.
And tell me, I see by 2023 we would have to, the committed amount will have to decline.
Yes.
Is there any long-term, I know you said previously, I don't know, maybe a year ago, that this was something that we had to do to hold on to money because we thought the state was going to come in and take part, but
So
now.
in the early, about 2011, 2012, they were looking at school districts who were building up unassigned fund balance. And there was rumor that the state might be looking at that. And so many districts then went and designated it for future construction, land, that sort of thing, and we have used it. What I've taken it down for is the board approved some of it. I've also reduced it for the extraordinary insurance claims and deductibles that we've had over the past year and a half. Used it for that, and I've taken it down as well to fit into that 27.1 on the unassigned. But that is something you as a board would have to approve.
But the crystal ball is it's not something, it's more important for us to keep up our 75 days than it is to have a committed balance.
Both are important to me. So that first, that non-spendable, that's required and it's based on other things in the balance sheet. But we do need a little bit to weather something like we did with it, that winter storm and hailstorm deductible, because those are things you don't plan for and you don't have operating revenues to cover those. And our deductibles are pretty high. We wouldn't be able to afford the insurance to lower them, so.
So yes, you need something committed. However, if you got to the 75-day threshold,
That's more
it would
important.
need to be unassigned
Yeah.
value to exceed the 75 days.
So that is your first priority, and then the second one is trying to have a little bit for a rainy day.
And
And
just,
we don't have a board policy or a district policy on how much at minimum we want to keep in committed.
No, sir.
Okay, just thank you.
then I was just looking also at the 75 days, obviously will continue to need to increase as our
Yes,
budget, as we
as our
grow and
budget
our budget
grows.
increases.
Yes,
That
ma'am.
looks like it went up 3%, right?
Right.
From last year.
So then looking at the teacher raise, if we did 2%, what that would look like on the bottom chart there, and remember that would be comparing to 21-22, our peer districts. So you can see the percentile 95% at 0, 93, 92, 93, and 95. So, and then once we get theirs, we would probably lose 1 or 2 percentage points. So that's what 2% would look like. Now, I do recall that that is not 2% on each, did not increase the step, but as teachers move from one year to the next, that's what that 2% is based on, to ensure base salary from one year to the next would increase by 2. That particular, and then, I'm sorry, not that one, but if we looked at a 5%, remember these are scenarios, any of these can change, or we can increase some groups and lower others. But if we look at a 5% for teachers, paraprofessionals, instructional assistants, and auxiliary, and keep admin and professional at 4, the estimated cost there is a little over 5.3 million. So that would bring the deficit to over $4 million estimated at this point. And then you can see that effect on fund balance, which at that point we are below the 75 days. That's really concerning to me. So, and then this 5% for the teachers, how that puts College Station to our peer medians. You can see we've gained even more. So 98, anywhere from 94 to 98%, depending on which year of experience you're looking at. So we do make some considerable gains, but the effect on fund balance without another revenue source is concerning. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about a voter-approved tax ratification election. Some people call this a VA-TRE, or others say a TRE, but it's all one and the same. So what is it? It's a method by which school districts, with voter approval, can increase their maintenance and operations tax rate, thereby increasing general fund revenues. Okay. So why would we even consider that? Well, first of all, if you look at the total tax rate for College Station ISD for the past, since 2016, between debt service, that's managing our debt and paying off some things, debt service and the maintenance and operations, we've had an 18-cent decline since 2016, or 13% in the last 5 years. Okay, and then looking to this current year, 2022, we believe 5.8-cent reduction is well within reach, and possibly even that 6.5 cents. So it's going to drop even further. So if we look at the 11.5, it could be 17.2% decline in the last 6 years, or 24 cents. So looking at that, we've had some considerable declines in the past, and then
Before we move forward, any questions?
that's why the tax rate thing throws me off. So we can raise with the TRE, we can raise our tax rate and keep more money, or lower the tax rate, the actual what I'm going to pay, but the school district gets to keep more.
It's, well, we're lowering the tax rate.
Okay.
Exactly, but it's offset, we're lowering the tax rate based on how much property values growth we have in the district. Some is new construction and new growth, and others is reevaluations.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to let Mr. Glenwinkle take the next few slides.
We felt this was appropriate as we went forward in considering a VATRE. We recently engaged with a third-party vendor, Basilis and Associates. This is the first any of this is being presented out into the public. The original idea was to poll our community regarding Proposition D and whether or not we would bring that back in front of the voters. Well, while we did that, we had them ask questions about about a potential TRE. So the poll was conducted via telephone. There were 300 respondents between the dates of May 11th and May 15th, with a margin of error of approximately 5.7 points plus or minus. And the way the survey worked was 150 of those surveyed got the Proposition D information first and the TRE information second, and 150 got the TRE information first and the Prop D information second. And what they did was they asked the ballot language. They asked the question, would you vote for or against on the tax ratification election, ratifying the ad valorem tax rate of 1.18 in college, exactly what it's going to say on the ballot. And the initial responses were 58% were for and 32% were against, with 26% being strongly for and 15% strongly against. Following the initial response, there were a series of statements that were made to the voters in attempt to inform them on the issue. And after those statements were made, each time the voter would say whether they agreed with the statement or not. And so what this helps us do a couple things. It helps us determine what are the things that resonate with voters the most. So if we were to go forward with something like this, or with Prop D, it would give us those data points to say these are the things that the voters thought this moved the needle the most with the voters, basically. Once all that was done, they read the ballot language again, and the informed ballot percentages you can see on the right, 65% after being informed said they would support a VATRE, and 28% said they would not. There's a big difference between the intensity as well, the 40% strongly and the 19% strongly, which is a good sign. And Amy, if you'll go to the next slide, we're not getting into a bunch of detail here, but just so you have this information in terms of a discussion, just so you might be wondering whether or not the community might even support this. But it just says here the key findings. Those 3 bullet points there in the middle are the 3 things that resonated the most with voters. And then if you go down to the red, that's kind of the bottom line of this whole thing. And it says there are a number of positive indicators that suggest success in passing a VATRE in November of 2022. This includes 58% support on the initial ballot, the 2-to-1 advantage in the intensity on the informed ballot, and the high levels of broad support among voter demographic groups. The tight initial intensity among the most likely voters points to the need for a communication effort about the TRE if an election is called. And, like anybody, they're going to put a caveat in there just in case it doesn't work out the way they say it's going to. So, any questions about that? Again, this is very 30,000 foot view data. Matt with Basilis and Associates is on the schedule to potentially come to the June 21st meeting to give you guys a way more in-depth look at this survey, not only with the VATRE findings, but what it said about Prop D. Any questions?
Obviously, the VATRE would be have an effect on the next budget cycle, not this one, right?
It would, 22, 23.
Yeah.
It would go into effect with the bills that are done with, this fall. So it would affect 22, 23.
Okay, but I mean, from the with us not knowing if it would pass or not, as far as adopting the budget
That's
for
what we're
22,
fixing to look
23. What's that?
We're fixing to look at
Okay,
that.
good deal, good deal.
That there are some different things that we might be able to do that would be dependent upon that. So if the board wanted to proceed with a TRE, these are some numbers or estimates of what 1, 2, 3, and 4 cents would do to the bottom line budget. So if I went out for a TRE and it was successful and asked for 1 cent, estimated on 1 penny would bring in about $1.1 million of tax revenue. But for the first 3 cents on a TRE, the state would be contributing. They're what we call enrichment pennies, so they do match part of that. So about $575,000 a penny there. So that 1 cent would bring about $1,675,000 somewhere in that category. For 2 cents, pretty much it doubles that. And for 3, then triples that. So at 2 cents, the total, including state revenue and taxes, is about 3.3 million, and at 3 cents, a little over 5. Now you'll recall at 4 cents, I said our enrichment pennies stopped, so our total additional state aid is still 1.7 million. It doesn't increase from the 3rd cent. We do get the property taxes, but you can also see that recapture starts setting in at the 4 cents.
I assume there's some kind of regulation on that bond proposal, because what I'm looking at is, so if we vote for the TRE, I get to drop my taxes from 1.221 to 1.18, and the school district gets more money.
Yes. So that's what that bottom, you just hit on the very bottom line. So the estimated tax rate it's currently is $1.2152 with the compression at 11.5% and a 1 cent decline. Taxpayers would still experience about a 5 cent decline in their tax rate. Not necessarily their tax bill they'd have to calculate that. At 2 cents would still have about a 4 cent decline, 3 cents, and then a 2 cent at 4 cents, but we would be paying recapture at that point.
But I mean, we need to be honest about how the compression part works, right? That we're only getting the original reduction because of compression, right? That's going to happen anyway, whether we do a TRE or not. There will be a reduction in the rate for our taxpayers. And it's not, I mean, maybe this might come at question part of it. It doesn't, I was looking at the numbers, it doesn't look like they are that 11.5%, if that's what we're working on as the total value increase. I'm not gonna necessarily, my personal taxes, if mine went up 11.5%, which it was close, would I get that? I wouldn't necessarily break even.
It all would depend on what your individual residence was at. So you have to realize the additional homestead exemption has come into play. So that's 25 to 40. That's an additional 15,000 off. And then in your residence, you are limited to 10% increase per year. And so your values might have gone up 15, but they're going to cap you at 10 this year. So, of course, that percentage, 10% is higher on a more expensive residence than the lower. So some of that all depends on where your values are and how much it went up.
But even just looking at the compression number itself, it doesn't look like it gets you all the way back to where you would be. Plus, correct me if I'm wrong, is it depends. Okay, that's fair. This is only on M&O. That's
Correct.
the other thing, right? So when people's rates are going up, they're still looking at INS.
Right, but
and
this tax rate is both M&O and INS. We've
it's already
calculated
calculated.
both.
I understand
Yes.
that, yes. But I'm just saying the
We're
compression
looking
is
at all limits.
compression is only hitting school,
Correct.
and it's on only the M&O part of school.
Correct.
Okay.
So if we did a TRE for 3 cents, what could we do with compensation? Now, again, this is just a scenario, and we can use these percentages. So some districts have done this past year. They did a TRE. The board approved two compensation plans. One is initially, no matter what happens, and then an additional compensation if the TRE passes. And so in this scenario, looking at the 2% that we looked at previously, that would have appropriations in excess of revenue of around $900,000. And then looking at going to an additional 4% for teachers. Now, this is all based on 21-22's salary, not 4% on top of the raises that were done. So a total of 6% for teachers, a total of 4% for admin and professional, 6% for the other two categories. That would relatively produce a balanced budget. It would make up for that $894,000 in compensation that was approved at 2%, and then with the additional revenue that's brought in, could potentially have a balanced budget. Again, these numbers can be changed. It's just a scenario and looking at what could we do with 3 cents. Right. And looking at 3 cents is because we're maximizing our state revenue.
We're not paying less taxes, that's what I'm trying to.
It's a lower tax rate.
Go ahead and try it. Reality is 1.21, 1.18.
Yeah.
Is it a drop?
Brock,
Yes.
tax
You can
rate.
definitely say it's a drop in the tax rate.
Correct.
But when my salary went up 10%, it's when my taxes were not going down.
That's correct. We are speaking tax rate. Absolutely. This is,
Right.
if we reflect back to where we did the bond, we did not increase the tax rate, but also on your ballot, it says it's a property tax increase because it is relative to increased values, right? So we are speaking to the rate. This, and I don't think this, you may have the next slide, so Amy, stop me. This kind of goes toward Josh's question. Others that have done a TRE after the budget year started, what they do is adopt one here, this one, period, no matter what happens. And then this compensation plan becomes active if the TRE passes.
That same year, right?
It
would be
becomes,
done.
and there's retro, correct?
Correct.
There's retro, and the retro becomes TRS eligible as well. But that's why you go through the process of adopting two. Does that make sense, correct, Amy?
This,
So, I mean, obviously, we're focused on the compensation part of this, and considering the circumstances of the last week in the state of Texas, this money that comes in, does it have to be used strictly for compensation, or does safety and security get to be an opportunity here for us as a district with the funds if this TRE is approved, if we go that route?
so this becomes general
General fund?
monies. What you as a board do in the way of a resolution and adopting that compensation plan may depend on how much of that is earmarked, but it becomes general fund monies to be used for anything in the general fund.
And then if the TRE passes, we talked about it retros. So TRE passes November 8th, I believe is election day, April 8th, or November 8th. Technically, if it's retroed, it would be possibly lump sum for the November 25th pay period, or December.
We'd probably need a little more time than that.
December 10th. And the only reason I say that is it's the holidays.
Right. It'd be December or January.
Kind of a neat
but,
little
most
deal.
of them did it in January.
If we go in that direction, I'm just outside the box thinking, but those two, the first one more importantly was just, is it general fund? And that's,
Yes,
okay.
it is general fund monies. It would depend on, as a resolution of what your commitment is for those funds as to what would be done with them.
And that would be voted on prior to the election, correct?
Yes. that additional compensation plan that would be dependent upon the TRE and any resolution of commitment that you as a board would make for this year with that TRE funds would be up to you guys.
And I'm sure we could figure it out by doing the math, but again, not my strong point. The different, the time frame between the retroactive payments and the revenues actually arriving. Would you still be okay fund balance?
You would,
wise?
because remember, I did show you all last year that we draw on our fund balance September, October, and November until we get our property taxes. We use 12 to $14 million of that fund balance. But this TRE would go out if it passes in the bills in November. As soon as that, we've got to work out some timing with the collection tax assessor and collector because we do have split pays in this county. Kind of makes it a little complicated. But we would be collecting on this starting in November, December. So the timing would not be any different than what we would normally have.
Can I ask, how do you feel, I guess, about recapture? If I see the 3 and the 4 cents, if I see 4 cents and I see $5 million, and I think a 5% raise or however we want to use it would be great, but is there a drawback?
Well, I think there's two things with the 3 cents. One is we are maximizing the state revenue at 3 cents. So that is the maximum amount that the state's going to contribute. And I think that was one of the questions in the survey, and that resonates with people. So
Go back one, please.
go ahead.
Exactly what Amy said on that. The way I look at it, Dr. Payne, is at 12.5%, and Amy's being conservative with 11.5%, but it's going to probably go 12.5 once it shakes out. That is going to take us up to 6.5 cents. The 3 to 4, if the state's giving us money, that just feels a lot better to me than collecting a little more to send to them. In addition to that, if it goes to 6.5 cents and we consider 3, we are giving the taxpayers back a half cent more than we're asking to allow us to keep. So if you go 4, that reverses. That is just the way I look at it. Again, it's still relative to the tax rate, but we would be asking to hang on to less than what would be being compressed down.
And to Jeff's point, after this survey was done this was done earlier in May. So if ever there were a time I would hope voters would come through for our school district, I would hope would be soon.
Well, this is we're just giving you a bunch of scenarios
Sure.
to chew on,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
we
my
wanna-
concern from what Chuck was talking about is what people say in a poll and what people do when they vote don't always line up, because the strongly against also increased, like 4%. So again, I realize we're just talking through scenarios, but I would,
to that.
yeah, the strongly against actually increased.
The total against did decline, but the other.
Yeah,
Chuck
which
will
is
speak to
great,
that.
which I want to see.
I
But
do have a theory on that. So if you look at the ballot language, it doesn't really talk about what it is. It's not a very
It's confusing.
explanatory
Go figure.
ballot language. It's saying,
that's where
hey,
Mr. Ben's strength comes through.
right. So in the process of informing voters, they realized, maybe some of them, that, oh wait, this could be an additional 3 cents that my tax rate goes down. And so I think that swayed some people the other direction. That's just a theory.
Or just the 4.47 number. Scary.
Right.
Yeah, that's what jumps out at me. Thank you.
And then to your point, I mean, even about the difference between the initial and then the informed, then the question also becomes, how do we make that informed happen? I mean, that would definitely be on us to the limits that we are able to do that. So I mean, I think that is kind of an important
Well,
kind of a piece of it too.
Chuck mentioned this, and when Boss Elise is here in June and they kind of go through it in detail, a part of this process is, again, as he mentioned, through some of their statements, it also gives us an indication of what statements resonate with voters. That gives us an indication of what message that folks feel most informed with.
No,
This
It's,
is the legal language.
it's a required language.
Because I don't know what it is.
It's amazing because this is for a TRE, but a bond tells you
Yeah.
it's a taxing. It's very in ballot language is very confusing, which my theory is it's intended to be. Okay. All right.
Okay.
So I do have a quick question. So with the TRE, why does the state match or give some money back?
Well, they
What-
call it, this was back, God, it's probably a little
I mean, is
before.
if your
House-
community puts a little more skin in it, they're willing to give a little bit more back. I mean,
It's up to a certain tax rate that they do, it basically entices at that higher tax rate. You know, you could do, that 5 cents, without voter approval. It was 4 for a very long time, and then they added the 1 penny, about 2 years ago. But anything beyond that requires voter, approval, and they'll match. It's up to 8 cents total, above
we just get-
above the
start
base of a
recapturing.
dollar, which they've now compressed. So a dollar doesn't even make sense anymore, but they still use that.
And of course,
Because
to be
it's all
a,
been compressed.
and of course, to be a Debbie Downer, they can change all of it the next legislative session.
Yes,
so.
they can. Yes, they can. But this one will be in this legislative session, and usually it should grandfather this part.
And that actually, maybe a good time for a question I had on, I was trying to compare tax rates like our district to other districts, but I'm not sure, after I looked a little bit, I'm not sure that makes sense
It
because,
doesn't make sense
because
anymore.
especially since compression has been happening, right? That it depends if, am I correct on that?
Correct.
Okay.
And then there is a maximum amount to compress. You can only be within a certain percentage. You can only be within a certain percentage. So if you get there, then they just take it and recapture. So yeah, it doesn't make sense to compare anymore.
No, anymore. That's really strange.
Not on the maintenance and operations side, it does
Yeah.
not.
Interesting.
Okay, so let me get back to, so this is the fund balance with this particular scenario, 6466. Fund balance would remain the same for 8/31/23 based on these numbers. So getting back into the white, we're not in the green yet, but we're in the white, okay? And this is if we could do a 6%, this is what that comparison group would look like to 21-22 in that peer group, anywhere from 95 to 99 percentile. And remember, this is based on, and then percentages are, as they move up a step, it does not increase each step by 6%, but as they move. So we've made some considerable progress here. If looking at a VA TRE, here's the tentative timeline. There's a lot of legal requirements that go with that. So at the June 21st board meeting, we would, of course, discuss more and possibly maybe consider the compensation plan at that point for 22-23. Have another board meeting in July to talk about it even more. Certified property values would come in, supposed to be here by July 25th. Which then TEA has until August 2nd to confirm that maximum compressed tax rate. But historically, what they've put out early in January, February has held. So we rely on that, but we do have to wait until August 2nd. Then we have to do some calculations, and we have to publish the notice of public meeting to discuss the budget and tax rate from anywhere from 10 to 30 days prior to that. Having the public hearing. So looking at time to make the calculations and get it in the newspaper, you're looking at somewhere between the July 29th and August 5th. And that would line us up for the August 16th board meeting, our regular board meeting, to hold a public hearing, adopt the budget, adopt the tax rate, and approve the VA TRE, should you so choose. The deadline to call the VA TRE for that November 8th uniform election day is August 22nd. If you recall last year for the bond, it was a day prior to the regular agenda, so we did it in July. But for a VA TRE, we could not do that in July. We have to wait for certified values. So just in summary, for the various scenarios that we showed you, and realize we can change any of those by just changing the percentages and doing the math. A 2% raise for all staff is minimal raise in comparison to our peer groups and what's been happening, but it also has a very minimal negative impact on fund balance. The 5% raise for teachers, auxiliary and paras, and 4% for admin is significant raise for our staff, but it also has a significant negative impact on fund balance that's a little concerning. And then the 6% for teachers and 4% for professional and admin, 6 for everybody else. That scenario that we showed you was dependent upon the passage of a VATRE, had significant raises for our employees, should not impact fund balance, and we still have a total decline in the tax rate for our taxpayers. So those are the 3 scenarios that we posed for you today. And with that, we'll open it up to questions.
You need to keep more of your money, pay your teachers more.
Pay them more. That's what I'd like to see. I'm glad we're working on it. The more the better.
You know, we have, as you know better than we do, we have competing issues. And so I like the scenarios, but one thing long term is bringing back the fund balance, bringing it back up.
Yes.
It's not, I don't think it's a discussion for these scenarios, but long term, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, are there things we can do to be more efficient in savings elsewhere to bring back our fund balance back up?
I think something through the process in the next several years or through the course of next year or even the year after. Of course, we have another legislative session coming, and only the good Lord knows what will occur at that point in time. I think that we have kind of trimmed and narrowed in all the operational type areas that we can. 85% of our budget is payroll. I think we just have to really look and ensure that we're being as efficient as possible with staffing. I would think that's just work that, of course, occurs over the next several years. And you know, TASB, other folks can provide some study and some work on us to let us know if there are areas that we're not being efficient and that we can become more efficient and provide us some feedback on that. I would think that's some work that we need to consider over the next several years to ensure that we are being efficient as possible with the largest chunk of our budget.
Thank you.
Oh, it's a very, very important point. Sorry, going back to my thought on the comparison to other districts a little bit. Because, I mean, that's what we are doing when we're doing this, right? You know, and kind of that question of if we're all kind of working with the same amount of money per student from the state, how come our numbers are not up where they should be? And obviously one piece of it is our efficiencies, which is, and not just efficiencies, just kind of, you know, some of the decisions we make, where we make to put our money internally. But then the other part is how we decide to tax. And if I can't compare rates, can I still at least have is there some way to kind of have an idea if these other districts have used these 8 pennies and what percentage of districts have maxed out their taxing capacity?
That's very interesting because I tried to do that, and because of compression, it was very difficult for me to look at their tax rate and determine where I know some districts have done the TRE prior to us being able to do the 1 cent 2 years ago. So they did 6 cents, but their tax rate is lower than ours right now because they had higher growth. So it's very difficult. I could go back a couple of years and tell if they were at $1.06 or $1.08 or $1.12. $1.17 was the max then, and calculate backwards and then look at it. There might be some databases, but I can't look at our peer districts, but just looking at their website and tell what happened.
You would have to look prior to compression.
And they're
And then
getting,
anything that happened since then, if they called a TRE.
assuming all things are equal, I can tell you what it is: the student-teacher ratio and lacking services. We have a very low student-teacher ratio. That's why we're able to get. I mean, look at our catch-up on MAPS data, catching back up from COVID because we have good student-teacher ratio. That's why teachers want to come teach here. And then the services, which will bring people here. That big billboard on Indian Lakes on coming up at 6, it doesn't say Indian Lakes, scenic views, bird watching trails, home of Texas A&M. It says CSISD schools. So how do we keep that level of performance without cutting elsewhere?
100% agree, and that's why I was saying it's the decisions we've made internally and where to spend our money, and that's,
Well, and it does get difficult to, when you start looking at the comparisons. I mean, because you have the Wallers that is just booming. I mean, we're growing, but they are booming. The Montgomerys and all that. I mean, that's just the facts of life. I mean, they're a little closer to Houston, and everybody's starting to move out. Unless you just want to get into Aggieland and come into College Station, then great. I mean, we'd love to have you. But it's hard to compare all those based on so many different factors, like y'all were saying. I appreciate y'all giving us as much data here just to kind of start the viewpoint. Chuck, I appreciate the info on the survey. I think that's key. I think it helps us be able to understand it, and then the community, because when I first heard TRE 3-4 months ago, all I heard was 3 letters. I'm just gonna be honest. So I've had to learn and research it and understand it myself. And that's why I asked some of the questions. Is this a general fund thing? Is this only a compensation thing? Because I think us as well as the community needs to be informed on that. But Mike says it all the time, y'all. We are a top 20 school district, and I believe it. And we can hang our hat on it and this and that. But also, Mike said, people are not knocking down doors to come teach right now. They're not knocking down doors to come fill spots that are open. It's just, it's the nature of where we're at. Community-wide, business-wise, I mean, we all are living it. So we have to separate ourselves from everybody else somehow. And that's our charge of what we've got to do here in the next month or two. So, because yes, we are an attractive school district to be at. You've said it. We have exceptional services. We provide exceptional education. We provide exceptional student and teacher relationships, and that is huge. And a lot of school districts don't have that, and we can hang our hat on that. But what is it that's going to separate ourselves from going to the other district, and why should we come here? Why should those teachers come and teach here? Why should our teachers that are here stay here? We've got to figure that out. And yes, we can work on it with the numbers and the compensation and all that, but there's some other parts that are key, and we can only help guide. So I appreciate it. I know we're kind of slammed on time. Do we have anything else?
I just want to go back to the timeline, make sure what we would be expecting as a team to decide in June. I mean, because, obviously, I do really think the important question is if we want to do if we address the TRE, in June, do we need to have 2 compensation plans at that point?
Whenever you adopt the compensation plan, and I believe we've done that in July as well before.
But usually-
We like to do it in June
Right.
because that is before the 12-month contracts expire. So there's some TRS issues if you don't do it before then, but we have done it in July before. But at the point that you adopt the compensation plan, then you adopt a second compensation plan dependent upon that. Of course, that doesn't mean you have to make that decision to call the TRE then. It's if the TRE
Okay.
is called and it passes, this would be the compensation plan then. So at which point you adopt the compensation plan, you would need to do both.
So am I hearing a maybe June?
Maybe June.
Maybe June.
Well,
Yeah, I do-
I guess this is just generic feedback, and again, I know several of us have a 5:30. You know, I don't. So it doesn't have to be June, you know, at all. Does it help with 12-month contracts? Yes, but that is not when the decision has to be made. I guess as I kind of look at the group, I'm just wondering where folks are just kind of where they're kind of hovering at the moment. If I can get a little bit of feedback, you know, I feel comfortable with TRE. Do you Do we consider it in our compensation plan? Do we not? And we just move forward and know and do what we do to manage the deficit? That's the kind of direction. I do not want to, I'd like to have a feel from the group.
I think going back to what Mr. Ben said, just kind of inquiring and y'all clarifying, the opportunity to adopt the two options is a huge, just kind of feather in our cap for us to be able to feel a comfort level, if you will. That I think my personal opinion, I think we can consider both. Because I think it's an opportunity to go down both roads with, hey, here's what we can do right now, but oh, by the way, in 3 months from the start or 2 months from the start of school, here's another opportunity that we're going to have. So my personal thing is I like the fact that we have an opportunity to adopt both options, if whatever those may be.
Well, and I 100% agree with that, because that makes it, it makes it easier on us, because it's going to put really the decision on the voters, right? If we decide to do a TRE, that would be the bottom line, right? Whether we,
I'd like to do as much as we can without the voters, but again, if ever there's a time, I hope our community and I hope voters turn out for it and support a TRE, which I hope we would do also.
My concern with the significant deficit is obviously the impact on the fund balance, but its implications in the out years. I struggle with a significant deficit. I do believe we need to compensate people as much as humanly possible. And we have to balance that with being financially responsible with our taxpayers' money too. So there are both sides to that. So okay.
yeah, exactly. We still got 18. And, yeah, and we are, sorry, we do have that, the stipend, at least for this year, is a help for 1 year, even though it's not ongoing. And this last thing on the timeline, I do feel like I know we could go July, but I do feel like we are a little behind as well. It seems like lots of other am I wrong? It sounds like a lot of districts have announced
A lot of districts have,
compensation
but many
plans.
of those are June 30 year-end districts as well. So
Okay.
they have to adopt their budget by June 30, where we have to do it by August.
And we typically on non-legislative years, we have done it in June before. Really, if it's a legislative year, it really impacts a lot because they're still working out the funding formulas, and typically districts are late because they really don't know what their finances look like. Yeah. But it would, June is an option.
I've just tried to explain that too. It's amazing there's so many moving pieces, and we're actually asked to even do it as early as June.
But many of those
kind of
are June 30
It's really
districts.
difficult.
So they're 2 months ahead of us.
What I imagine in June, if we do this, it will first have workshop, and then have time to digest, and then go into the meeting. You're not just gonna. This isn't just gonna go straight to the meeting. Yes.
If it were, I'd have Amy go through everything at workshop, and then any particular action would be in the regular meeting.
Right.
Correct.
Would there be a need to have another meeting before the June meeting?
Be up to you all.
Probably not.
Yeah, I don't know. I just
I think that's something the
I
board
think
needs.
I think this is something that maybe y'all can discuss. Is it something you can put out in transmittal, or is it something we do need to either wait for the workshop to visit and workshop, or would it have to have another meeting for this specifically?
Mr. Horak used the term digest. There's not a lot of time to digest between the workshop and the regular board
No,
meeting.
it's an hour.
But that's why I asked if I didn't know what could be put out in transmittal and what couldn't. I didn't know.
Yeah, but transmittal is purely informational.
Informational,
purposes.
yeah.
Could we decouple?
It could be June workshop. This is what we anticipate bringing for your consideration regarding compensation at the July meeting. That's possible as well.
Or could we decouple the workshop from the meeting for June? Have the workshop a week or two earlier and then have the meeting in June?
Or worst case scenario, we have the board meeting and then a week later have a special session like this. There's a lot of options.
Because I'm in agreement, we need to really get it done in
Look at
June.
it.
I mean,
Yeah.
no matter what the
Let us
decision
look at some
is.
things, and we may send you just a little survey as far as available dates.
Okay.
How about that?
And
Now,
Mr.
remember,
Martindale,
the June board meeting is late this year.
It
It's-
is late,
It's
yeah, right.
21st because of how the calendars.
Mr. Martindale, in answer to your question that you asked, I like the idea of the two potential tracks because I'm very hesitant as a board member to, as much as we have got to find a way to increase salaries, to put us into where another catastrophic weather event happens and we are now below our 75-day fund balance. I just don't know if that's something that I would feel fiscally responsible doing. At the same time, coupling that with, hey, there's this alternative with the TRE, I don't want to say, I'm trying to think of the better way to say this, but calls out the community of, hey, if you want more security, if you want teachers compensated more, then this is an option. And so I think offering that is a potentially a good plan.
All right. If there's nothing else, we will adjourn. Thank you guys again. Thank you, Chuck,
Thank
for
you.
your input, and we'll call it adjourned.